So let's say you've successfully submitted your LOI, it's been accepted. Now you're moving into figuring out financing. One area where I see people have some uncertainty, just not quite know kind of how to calculate it is working capital. This is a big question for a lot of people. So I want to walk through that with you, and I'm going to pull up your spreadsheet. And maybe as I'm doing that, you can start kind of talking about why is this something that's important to figure out early in the process?
Yeah, definitely. When trying to identify net working capital needed in the business, it's very, very critical because whether the seller's providing it, you're getting it financed, or some combo of both, short funding the business is just as bad as overfunding. And coming from the seat of a lender, when you're 60 days post closing your acquisition and you come back to the lender asking for more money, nobody likes that phone call. It's not a fun phone call to have. So we want to make sure that we're structuring it appropriately in the first place. And so a lot of times where this can get lost, or there's a lot more gray area, is in accrual accounting based businesses. Of course, when you're working with a cash based or a POS type business, restaurants, retail, laundromat, things like that, it's a little bit easier to identify that because your turn is very quick. Cash comes in, cash
Mhm.
goes out. Um, but when you're working with those accrual type businesses that are offering terms, that's where this becomes significantly more highlighted. And so in this model that we prepared, this is an actual closing that we had earlier this year. It was about a $1.1 million transaction, and the buyer put in 5%, and so their capital investment was, I think, about $70,000. And so I say that just to give perspective as to the working capital provided, because in this example, it needed way more than they put in, and there are some lenders that are hesitant to fund working capital in excess of the injection. Um, but my view is very much that we need to appropriately fund the business, regardless of the perception of how much injection they put into the deal. The operations are what they are, and we base it off of a historical basis, and we need to fund that bridge. So, in this example, they had a very, very slow cash conversion cycle. So they were doing about $2 million top line, and were right around 450,000 in net income. And so if you look at the model provided, and this is just something that we use, so this isn't a perfect science, or it isn't law. This is just a model that I use to help to back into this. But basically, you, from a historical basis, look into, okay, how much cash expenditure do they have per day? And so in this case, it's about $4,100. We did, or the buyer's due diligence did identify that they had a 72-day cash conversion cycle. So from the first expense incurred to the last drop of revenue, generally took 72 days. That's a pretty long cash conversion cycle, which is why this business demanded so much cash. And so, um, by identifying that that cash conversion, or excuse me, the daily expenditure of $4,100, you multiply that by your cash conversion cycle, so 72, and that's where we can identify that the working capital need was about 350, or excuse me, about $300,000. And so then you would back out pro forma principal, which is that 59,000, to get to the point where we provided about $360,000 of working capital. Now, if you look in the model below, using the same business and the same numbers, that shakes out to be 12 weeks of cash. So in this example, it worked out to be exactly right at that 3-month mark. but it's not always as simple as taking the cost of goods dividing by 12 times by 3. It worked out in this example, but a lot of times, depending upon that cash conversion cycle, it can be a lot more money, or it can be a lot less. And so the biggest thing is identifying how they get paid, who's paying, and what is their cash conversion cycle. And if the sellers don't understand what cash conversion cycle is, just ask them, from the first second you are spending money on a client to the last second you get revenue, how long is that?
I think to your point, Ryan, just to highlight again, this does really speak to the amount of nuance that there is in SBA, because I have heard that from lenders of, oh, well, we can't give X amount of working capital because they're only putting in half of that to the deal, right?
Right.
And each lender is going to approach things a little bit differently. And SBA can seem like this cut and dry thing, but there really is nuance to it. So this is really helpful to go through. If you're enjoying this content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out the links below in the show notes to see how you can get in touch with me to discuss your business acquisition deal.